For years I thought this forest was empty. I was wrong. It was just listening. I took the same path home every night, a narrow logging trail cutting through miles of old pine. The ground had frozen hard that evening, every step ringing faintly against the soil, like tapping on stone. The air was dry and sharp, the kind of cold that carries sound much farther than it should. In a place like that, every noise matters, and every noise lingers. The strange part began with a rhythm. I stopped for a moment to adjust my scarf. The fabric brushed softly against my jacket, and the sound died quickly in the trees. But a second later, a dry click, short, precise, like a twig snapping inches from my face in complete darkness. I froze. The forest returned to silence. I took a cautious step forward. My boot crushed a small piece of gravel beneath the snow. Crunch. Then the answer came. Two clicks this time. Closer. It wasn't an echo. Echoes repeat sound. This was measuring it. Something was sending a signal toward me, and listening to how it came back. I turned slowly, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness beyond the tree line. At first I thought it was a fallen branch. Then it moved. The shape stood at the edge of a small clearing where old trees had been cut years ago. It crouched low on four limbs bent at unnatural angles. The joints looked wrong, like they had been assembled without understanding how bones normally worked. Its skin was pale gray and stretched tight over a skeletal frame, and its head had no eyes. None. Where eyes should have been, the upper half of its skull was covered in thin folds of flesh and trembling membranes. They quivered constantly, reacting to every shift in the air. A living receiver, a biological radar. The creature tilted its head. In that moment, I understood the rules. As long as I stayed perfectly still, I was just another vertical object in the forest. A tree, a stump, part of the environment. But the second I moved, my breathing, my heartbeat, the sound of my jacket shifting, all of it would become a perfect three-dimensional map in its mind. Running wasn't an option. You can't outrun something that sees with sound. The creature took a slow step forward. Soft, almost silent. It was closing the distance cautiously, curious about the strange object that had suddenly appeared in its territory. Its mouth opened slightly. From inside came a low, vibrating chatter. The sound wave hit my chest like a faint pulse of pressure. It had scanned me, and now it understood what I was. Soft, warm, alive. Food. The creature lowered its body toward the ground, preparing to leap. Distance, maybe 30 feet. My mind went cold. Panic wastes time. Thinking saves it. The only way to fool sonar is to give it something louder than yourself. A false target. In my right pocket were my keys and my work phone. Heavy, rugged, thick protective case. To my left, maybe 10 feet away in the brush, sat the rusted skeleton of an old farm machine, a pile of twisted iron abandoned decades ago. If I threw something into that metal, the sound would explode through the forest. But the throw itself could betray me. If it heard my arm move, it would attack before the phone even left my hand. I needed to move when the creature made its own noise. The creature opened its mouth wider, preparing another scan. The membranes on its head trembled. Then, kutch! A sharp clicking burst ripped through the air. At that exact moment, I pulled the phone from my pocket and threw it as hard as I could toward the rusted machinery. I didn't breathe. The phone flew through the darkness. Then, bam! Metal exploded with sound. The impact echoed like a gunshot. The old machine vibrated violently, rattling and humming as the phone bounced against its frame. The reaction was immediate.
The creature launched sideways like a released spring. A gray blur slammed into the metal heap.
Claws screeched against rusted iron as it attacked the loudest source in the forest. It tore at the machinery, ripping and clawing at the noise. I didn't watch. While the creature shredded steel, I slowly lowered myself to the ground. No sudden movements. I flattened my body against the cold earth and began crawling in the opposite direction. Every motion was slow, controlled. The grass bent softly under my weight, but the sound vanished beneath the creature's violent assault on the metal wreck. After maybe 30 seconds, the noise behind me stopped. The creature had realized something was wrong. The iron didn't bleed, didn't move, didn't breathe. Then the clicking started again. Fast, panicked. Tick, 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 tick. It had lost the target. It was scanning the forest again, trying to locate the tall, soft object that had been standing on the trail. But the object was gone. I was lying flat in a shallow ditch, my body low enough that the sound waves passed over me without catching. The creature circled nearby. At one point, I heard its steps only 10 feet away. Then something strange happened. It tried to imitate a sound, a rough exhale. Almost human, like someone whispering in the dark. It was bait, trying to trick me into answering, trying to make me reveal my position. I pressed my face into the leaves and slowed my breathing until black spots filled my vision. Minutes passed, then more minutes. Eventually, the clicking moved deeper into the trees, still searching, still listening. I stayed where I was for nearly an hour. The cold seeped through my clothes, into my bones, but moving too early would have been the last mistake I ever made. When I finally reached my house, dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. I entered slowly, quietly. The first thing I did was walk to the hallway clock. The ticking suddenly sounded deafening. Tick, tick, tick. Too loud. I opened the back panel and removed the battery. The hands froze instantly. The house fell into silence. Perfect silence. Because now I understand something most people don't. Darkness doesn't watch you. It listens. Truck drivers have a name for a certain moment on the road. They call it the wolf hour. It happens somewhere between 3 and 4 in the morning, when coffee stops working, music turns into background noise, and the highway begins to feel unreal. Like the world outside your windshield is covered in a thin layer of oil. That's when strange things catch up to you. I was driving alone. 200 miles of empty steppe stretched between me and the nearest city. The highway cut straight through the darkness like a ruler. No towns, no lights, no traffic, just asphalt and silence. The speedometer held steady at 65. Inside the cabin, it was warm. The air smelled faintly of the cheap Forest Berries air freshener hanging from the mirror and the plastic dashboard that had been heating under the vents all night. My car felt like a capsule, a small, moving island separated from the rest of the world. The first warning wasn't something I saw, it was something I heard. Through the constant hum of tires and wind, another sound pushed its way into the cabin. Rhythmic, wet, close. Top, 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 top. At first, it sounded like something flapping in the wind. Then, it sounded like footsteps, heavy footsteps, right outside the passenger door, like someone running beside the car wearing enormous, soaked flippers. I glanced at the right mirror. Nothing. Just the black wall of roadside grass caught at the very edge of my headlights. Probably nothing, I muttered to myself, turning the music louder. But the sound got closer. Now it sounded like raw meat slapping against pavement, and the rhythm didn't match the rotation of the wheels. My pulse sharpened instantly. I turned my head toward the passenger window. At first, I saw nothing. The tint and the darkness hid everything outside the beam of the headlights. Then, the car hit a small seam in the asphalt. The front lights jolted slightly. For a fraction of a second, the beam swung sideways, and it illuminated something running beside me. My brain refused to accept it. At 70 miles per hour, nothing should be able to run next to a moving car. The wind alone should knock it down. But it was there, keeping pace. It stayed just behind the front pillar of the car, in the blind spot where I could barely see it. A pale shape, long, unnaturally stretched. Its limbs moved with terrifying smoothness, almost like slow motion. Its knees lifted high, almost level with the window, then dropped again with soft, springy precision. It wasn't fighting the wind. It flowed through it. Cold sweat exploded across my back. The last traces of sleep vanished instantly. "What the hell?" I whispered. I pushed the accelerator. The engine growled as the speed climbed. 75, 80, 85. The figure didn't struggle. It simply increased the rhythm of those wet footsteps. Thop, 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 thop. The movements became faster, but just as smooth, like it was tethered to the car with an invisible cable. Then it leaned closer to the window and looked inside. I didn't see a face. I saw something like a mask made of pale, stretched skin. No nose, no ears. Just a thin, horizontal mouth and two enormous dark eyes. Black, glossy, reflecting the lights of my dashboard. It wasn't looking at the road. It was looking at me. Curious, like a child studying an insect trapped inside a jar. Then it lifted its hand. The arm bent in a strange, extra joint. 3 long fingers pressed against the passenger window. Tap, 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 tap. At 85 miles per hour, the sound felt like gunshots. I screamed and jerked the wheel left. The car drifted toward the guardrail before I managed to correct it. The creature didn't react. Its palm stayed against the glass. The fingers flattened like suction cups, testing the barrier. It wanted inside. It was checking if the capsule would open. My instincts screamed to speed up. But another thought cut through the panic. It wasn't chasing me. It was running with me. Something about motion was helping it stay there. Speed was its element. So I did the opposite. I slammed the brakes, hard, but not enough to spin. The car lurched forward as the speed dropped. 80, 65, 50. The creature shot ahead instantly. Momentum carried it forward like a slingshot. For one brief second, it passed through the full beam of my headlights, and I saw it clearly. Tall, gray, too thin. Its knees bent backward like an animal's. Its body wasn't built for stopping. It was built for endless forward motion. The creature tried to slow down, failed. Its legs tangled beneath it, and it tumbled across the asphalt in a blur of long limbs. At that exact moment, a semi-truck roared past in the opposite lane. Its horn blasted, its headlights exploded across the road, and the gray shape vanished beneath the massive wheels. The truck never slowed. Neither did I. I drove another 10 minutes before I saw the bright lights of a large highway gas station. I pulled in so fast I nearly clipped a plastic safety cone. I parked directly under the cameras near the entrance. The white lights were blinding. Safe. People were there. A tired security guard smoking near the trash can.
A family loading suitcases into a minivan. Normal life. I stepped out of the car on shaking legs. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Part of me tried to convince myself it had been a hallucination, a microsleep, something my exhausted brain invented. Then I walked around the car. On the passenger window, there was a handprint. 4 fingers, long, twice the length of a human hand. A greasy gray smear already beginning to dry into powder. I grabbed a bottle of water from the trunk and scrubbed the glass until it squeaked. I didn't want anyone else to see it. I didn't want proof that the world had just changed shape. I waited for sunrise at that gas station, finished the drive in daylight.
I don't drive at night anymore, and I never speed on empty highways. Because now I understand something most drivers don't. When you go fast enough on a lonely road, you might catch up to something living in your blind spot. Or worse, it might catch up to you. Left is the slow crackle of a dying fireplace. The quiet begins pressing against your ears. I was waiting for my friend Oleg. He said he'd arrive around 8. We planned to close the season at my cabin, grill some meat, drink a little, and talk through the mess of his recent divorce. But by 10, he still hadn't shown up. There was no cell service in the valley. That wasn't unusual. The signal disappears completely once you leave the highway. So I sat in an armchair, turning a Rubik's Cube in my hands, trying to solve the blue side while listening to the wind moving through the trees outside. That's why I didn't hear a car. No engine, no door slam, no crunch of tires on snow. There was only a knock on the window. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. I jumped in the chair. The window was on the back side of the house, the yard where no car could reach. Snow there was waist deep. "Oleg?" I called as I walked toward the glass. Outside was pure darkness, but in the warm reflection of the living room lights, I saw a face pressed directly against the window. The nose flattened against the glass, the lips stretched into a friendly smile. It was Oleg. Relief washed through me instantly. "You idiot," I muttered. "You scared the hell out of me. Go to the door." I walked to the entryway and opened it. Cold air flooded inside. Oleg stepped into the hallway. He wasn't dressed for winter. Just a light fall jacket hanging open over a t-shirt. No hat. His ears were red from the cold, but he didn't rub them. "Hey," he said. The voice sounded like his, but something about it was wrong. Flat. Like he was speaking while holding his breath. "Where's your car?" I asked, reaching out to shake his hand. "And why are you dressed like that?" Oleg grabbed my hand. His palm was ice cold. "Car there," he said vaguely. "Car there," he said vaguely, gesturing somewhere outside. It broke. I walked. He walked into the living room without taking off his boots, leaving wet prints across the floor. I decided not to comment. The guy had obviously frozen half to death. "Sit by the fire," I said. "I'll make tea. Or do you want something stronger?" "Tea," he answered. He sat on the couch, back perfectly straight, hands resting on his knees, palms up, like a mannequin posed in a store display. From the kitchen, I could still see him through the archway, and the longer I watched, the worse the feeling got. Oleg was smiling. He had been smiling since I saw him at the window, and the smile never moved. Even when he spoke, only his lips shifted slightly. The corners of his mouth stayed locked in place. I brought 2 mugs of tea and placed one in front of him. "So what happened with the car?" I asked. "Battery," he said instantly. Too instantly. I sat across from him and looked directly into his eyes. That's when a chill ran through my entire body. Oleg wasn't blinking. The room was dry from the fireplace. My own eyes already felt irritated. I blinked every few seconds. Oleg sat there with his eyes wide open, unmoving. The surface of his eyes slowly began to dull, drying, like the cloudy eyes of a dead fish. But he didn't react. "Your eyes okay?" I asked carefully. Something shifted in his face. The muscles beneath the skin twitched like someone adjusting a focus knob. Then his eyelids slowly closed, opened again. "No," he said, and the smile widened. Now it exposed not only his teeth, but his gums. Too pink, too wet. That's when I understood. The thing sitting across from me wasn't my friend. It looked like Oleg, sounded like Oleg, but it didn't know how to use the body properly.
It had pulled the skin over itself, but forgot to learn how humans move.
"Hey," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Remember last summer when we went fishing and you lost that huge pike?" The creature froze, processing, searching for a memory that didn't exist. "Fishing," it repeated slowly. "Yes, that was fun." We had never gone fishing. Oleg hated fishing. My brain screamed one word: run. But the exit was behind the creature. My car keys were on the hallway table. It lifted the mug of tea. The water inside was still boiling hot. I had poured it seconds ago. It took a long drink. No reaction, no flinch, no pain. "Good," it said. Then I saw something else. On the side of its neck, just below the ear, the skin had slightly separated, like tape peeling off. Inside the opening, there wasn't muscle. There wasn't blood. There was darkness. Perfect, empty darkness. The creature noticed where I was looking. The smile stretched wider, too wide. The corners of the mouth crept toward the ears. The skin on the cheeks pulled tight, then tore. A quiet, ripping sound, like paper. No blood came out. "You noticed," it rasped. The voice changed. Now it sounded like stones grinding together. It began to stand. The movement was jerky. Its knees didn't bend smoothly. They clicked into place. I needed a distraction. Something simple, something automatic. "Oleg! Your phone's ringing!" The creature froze. It immediately slapped its pockets, perfectly mimicking a human reflex. But there was no phone. That 1 second of confusion was enough. I threw my mug of hot tea directly at its face. The creature didn't block it. It didn't know eyes needed protection. The liquid splashed across its wide, unblinking eyes. It made a sound like air escaping a punctured tire and stumbled backward over the coffee table. I ran. Through the hallway, grabbed the car keys. Behind me came a crash. The creature didn't climb over the couch. It leaped over it, launching with all 4 limbs like a giant insect. I burst onto the porch. Cold air hit my lungs. I sprinted to the car. My hands were shaking so badly the key slipped from my fingers into the snow. I dropped to my knees, digging through the powder in panic. Behind me, the door opened. The creature stood on the porch, watching. Its face had slipped sideways. Underneath was a smooth gray surface without features. It was adjusting the skin again, trying to put the smile back where it belonged. I found the key, jumped into the car, locked the doors. The engine started instantly. I threw the car into reverse and slammed the gas. In the headlights, I saw it one last time,
standing at the gate, still smiling. But now, it held its own lips with its fingers, stretching them manually. The facial muscles had stopped working. It raised one hand and waved goodbye. The palm faced backward. I drove straight to the nearest police station. I didn't tell them about the mask or the smile. I just said someone might be breaking into cabins. They found Oleg 3 days later, 10 miles into the forest, frozen to death. The report said hypothermia. No signs of violence. Animals hadn't touched him. Only one strange detail: his face. The medical examiners said the stretched expression was just a post-mortem muscle spasm from the cold. But when I saw him, I knew. His mouth had been pulled wide, far too wide, like someone had been practicing how to smile, using his face as training. I sold the cabin. I never go back to the countryside. And I deleted every photo of Oleg from my phone. Because in every picture, he's smiling. And I'm afraid one day, one of those photos will blink.